Hello, medical students in India. This is Amr from Egypt, and this lecture is for you. This lecture is about multiple myeloma. The first question is, what is multiple myeloma? It is a clonal proliferation of the plasma cells. This is the plasma cell. There is uncontrollable proliferation of the plasma cells. This is the second most common hematologic malignancy. The question here, what are hematologic malignancies? Do you know? The first one is leukemia, lymphoma, and multiple myeloma. These are the hematologic malignancies. The most common type of hematologic malignancies is non-Hodgkin lymphoma. The second most common one is multiple myeloma. And here is the lecture of today. It is the second most common form of hematologic malignancies is multiple myeloma after or behind non-Hodgkin lymphoma. What is the origin of the plasma cells? Here is the bone marrow, as we see, produces from the hematopoietic stem cells the B lymphocytes. This is the shape of the B lymphocytes. B lymphocytes on exposure to antigen become converted into plasma cells in the spleen and lymph nodes. The plasma cells returns again to the bone marrow to live in its house, where its house is the bone marrow. In this disease, there is uncontrolled or proliferation of the plasma cells, and so the bone marrow become loaded with plasma cells. Plasma cell, its function is to produce antibodies, and when there is increased proliferation of these plasma cells, there is increased production of large amounts of antibodies. What are the types of antibodies? Do you know? Answer me, any medical students in India. It's immunoglobulin G, immunoglobulin A, immunoglobulin M, immunoglobulin E, and immunoglobulin D. These antibodies are called the monoclonal antibodies. It's called the monoclonal antibodies. Here, monoclonal antibodies. The plasma cells, in cases of multiple myeloma, produces large amounts of immunoglobulin G, immunoglobulin A, immunoglobulin M, and also they produce immature immunoglobulins. It's called the light chains. We know that the immunoglobulin is composed of two parts, the light chain and the heavy chain. Because these plasma cells are immature, because of rapid proliferation, they produce free light chains or heavy light chains, which are parts of the immunoglobulins. 40% they produce free light chains. These free light chains are small. They are either kappa or lambda light chains, and they are passed into the urine, producing proteinuria. This is called Bence-Jones proteinuria. And this is a site of MCQ in the United States medical license examinations. This is MCQ in USML. This is MCQ for the USML. Again, it is a clonal proliferation or uncontrollable proliferation of plasma cells because it is malignancy. Plasma cells originate from B lymphocytes when it is exposed to the antigen in the spleen and lymph nodes and become again to the bone marrow. Plasma cells produces large amounts of immunoglobulins like immunoglobulin G, which is the most common form, A, M, and also produces small parts of immunoglobulins like the kappa or lambda light chains, which become passed into the urine and produces what's called, this is a question here, Bence-Jones proteins in the urine. Stages of multiple myeloma. Here we have three elements. Number one, the immunoglobulin produced, which are called the monoclonal proteins or the gamma globulins, the plasma cells itself in the bone marrow, and the clinical manifestations of multiple myeloma. If they produce small amounts of immunoglobulins less than 3 gram per deciliter, or the bone marrow biopsy revealed 10% less than 10% only of plasma cells in the bone marrow with no symptoms, this is called the MGUS, which is monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance. Monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance, where the amount of monoclonal proteins is less than 3 gram per deciliter, which means it is a small amount, and the plasma cells also is produced less than 10% in the bone marrow with no clinical manifestations, and it is a pre-myeloma state. It is a pre-myeloma state. It's called the MGUS. And here is a question also for USMIL. What's the MGUS? It's a type of plasma cell dyscrasia where the amount of monoclonal antibodies is less than 3 gram per deciliter and the amount of plasma cells in the bone marrow is less than 10% with no clinical manifestations. What if this increases? The monoclonal proteins becomes more than 3 gram per deciliter, the plasma cells in the bone marrow becomes more than 10%, but still no clinical manifestations. This called the smoldering myeloma. Smoldering myeloma. Smoldering myeloma means it's a hidden myeloma. It's actually is a true myeloma because the amounts of monoclonal proteins is more than 3 gram per deciliter and the plasma cells in the bone marrow is more than 10%. So it's actually a myeloma, but no clinical manifestations yet. It's called smoldering myeloma. What if the three items become fulfilled? The proteins is more than 3 gram, the plasma cells is more than 10%, and there is clinical manifestations. This is a classic multiple myeloma. The classic multiple myeloma. Follow me on follow me on my channel. I am Amr from Egypt, and follow the channel. Subscribe and like. I will make videos for Indian medical students. Thank you so much.